An update letter is essentially a piece of correspondence you send to a medical school. It's intended to update them on what you've been doing since you applied and also show some interest in them as an institution. Usually, you would send out an update letter maybe around October or so or November during interview season, especially if you feel like you're not getting interviews or responses from schools. Sometimes people don't feel the need to send out updates because they're getting a lot of action from schools. It is kind of intended to see if you can garner more interest from the schools than you've been getting up to that point. Maybe about a paragraph or two is just telling the school the meaningful things you've been doing since submitting your application, along with hopefully trying to connect those updates to aspects of their school, like their values or some of the opportunities they have. How it's different from a letter of interest or a letter of intent. Usually, the letter of interest and the letter of intent are later in the process once you've already had an interview with the school or maybe you've gotten some kind of response from a school. I think the update is more meant for the schools that you haven't heard anything back from. And we can talk more about how they're different as the conversation goes too.
To understand update letters, you have to understand the timeline of the application process. So the primary application can be sent first in May, and pre-meds being who they are, almost all of them submit in May. And so that's your life in an application package. Secondaries start coming out the end of June. You respond to them quickly, and then you wait. If you're lucky, you get an interview invite in August or September, say. By October, November, it's been 4 or 5 months since you submitted your primary application. So update letters are a way to tell medical schools, I'm continuing to do excellent work / live my best life, and here's the evidence of that in the form of an update letter. The other way to think about update letters is it's your chance to show that you can have professional correspondence, to surprise or delight the admissions committee, to be respectful of their time. It's a different format, in other words, than the application, which is much more specific. This is your chance to, with a clean slate, send a letter that there's no rules really on what this should look like and can you do it well. That's what it can show schools. So a letter of intent or a letter of interest is a different thing. You're trying to show that school that you really want to go to their school. That's something you do at the end of the process, typically once you're on a wait list. And that's going to be a one-time thing that you do in, say, March, before you know your final school list, as a way of trying to get off that wait list and get one of those coveted acceptances.
Yeah, I would say the actual impact of an update letter is pretty hard to pinpoint, pretty hard to measure. I think it's going to depend a lot on what school you're sending it to. It's probably going to depend probably mostly on how impactful your updates actually are, because some people have really meaningful things to share in their updates, like they've gotten one or two new publications, or they've taken on a significant new experience in the realm of patient care, or they've started some new initiative that they're the leader for, and hopefully there's also a really snug connection between those updates and things about that institution. And I think if you can do both of those, like actually have really big, impactful updates and connect it well to the school, odds are that's going to move the needle a lot more than someone just sending an update that says, hey, I'm continuing to be a scribe and I'm continuing to do this. Not that you can't send those sort of updates as well, but I think there are definitely measures of what makes a good one versus a bad one. And often it's just that you've been the kind of person to really take initiative to do meaningful things in your gap year. The other thing I've covered over the years is I think a lot of students don't really realize that update letters are a thing, or they don't really know quite what they mean or when to send them. And so I do think if you have knowledge of them and are planning to do it as part of your process, it could give you a slight leg up against all these people who don't think about it or think that it's a weird thing to do or think that it's a too extra or like an uncouth thing in the application process or something. So I think it's hard to say, in like a quantifiable way exactly how impactful they are, but I think they definitely can and have helped people.
One of the dirty secrets of med school admissions is that they don't read every application. They get too many to read, and every year usually surpasses the prior year to set a new record for the number of applicants they receive. That's a vicious cycle because it's hard to get in and people start applying to more and more schools. It just goes in one direction. Because they don't read every application, if you're in that maybe pile, little things can make a difference. So a nice update letter with a little humor or politeness can be a reason they look again at your application and think, I like this person. I'll invite them to an interview. It can be something so small. So these small things can make an impact. Are they likely to? No. So don't sweat update letters too much. But I do think it's something that you should try, especially if you're charming.
So I think around October or November is a good time to send your first one. And I do think as long as a school doesn't have any rules against letters, which is something you should look into before you send it, because you could irritate a school if they clearly have an outlined policy against them. But you can essentially send that first one in October or November to all of the schools that you haven't heard back from. You can think about it a little bit as like the final secondary essay you're going to send, where you could send a lot of the same thing to each school, reusing a lot of the letter to each school, but really making sure you take the time to personalize and differentiate and distinguish enough so that the school can tell you didn't literally just send the exact same letter to all 30 on your list. And then I probably wouldn't send another one until it's much later, maybe like January. And you can think of the second update letter around January as necessary. Hopefully, your interview situation will have improved by January and you won't feel as pressured. And you may not even need to send the second one. But the second one is if things haven't really improved by January, this is maybe my last shot to really grab school's attention that I haven't grabbed by then, and you want to really pour a lot of energy into those January update letters where you're really laying it on in terms of like why they're such a significant top choice for you, why you feel like it's such a good fit, what are the ways that your experiences align with theirs, and maybe even target fewer schools at that point to make it more impactful. There's a lot of ways to go about it, but I would say first one in October, second one in January, and I probably wouldn't do too many beyond that.
So many admissions committees have opted out of this whole game. They said, hey, we don't want update letters. It's too much to keep track of. It's too many emails coming in. And so if they've opted out, the worst thing you can do is not read that on their website or the IMSAR and then send them an update letter, because it shows you can't follow directions and you won't be a good student at their school. Because update letters are not required, you should also not send them unless you have something to say. As a side note, continue being excellent and seeking interesting things to say to med schools during your application year. Don't just sit on your hands or do the same things you've always done. Continue to try to lead a life that'll look good on paper and have updates. So you should send one in the fall if you have something to say. You should send one in January if you have something to say, because beyond January, most schools run out of interview spots to give. So what's the point? Understand why schools have waitlists. They have waitlists because they want a diverse incoming class and they don't know what their class will look like when they first take people from the interview process. So they need a pool of people they can choose from should spots come available. Why do spots come available? Well, there's a pecking order of medical schools. If NYU, which is free, accepts a student, well, that sucks them off of a accepted list from another school. That movement is fairly unpredictable from year to year. Some schools have a banner year one year and not another, and so they need a pool of candidates to pull from. So some schools will then rank order their candidates. Many won't, most won't, and they are seeking balance. So the Supreme Court notwithstanding, schools still believe in a diverse incoming class. They want a balance of men and women. It's not an exact quota. They want a balance of viewpoints and experiences, and sometimes geographic diversity matters to schools. So some of these spots are out of your control, which students they take from the waitlist, because maybe they need to balance out the class in a certain way and maybe you do or don't fit that bill. But if there is an unranked portion where there's a pool of acceptable candidates, and that's what you are if you're on a wait list, that's where an update letter can mean the difference between them accepting you versus not. Schools get measured on something called yield. This used to be an official part of the US News rankings. It's now kind of an unofficial thing, which is of the students they accept, how many choose to go there. So schools want students that are going to choose to go there. They don't want to be begging for scraps. So you can show them you would choose them, even if you were accepted to another medical school, through a high quality letter of intent or update letter.
I don't think I would ever make your update letter longer than a single page. I think that's already kind of pushing it in terms of um, being too exhaustive. I think the longer a document is, the less likely people are going to read it and read it carefully. So I know you might feel like, oh, I have all of these really great things that I've been doing that I need to tell people about, or I really want them to hear about every little tiny detail. But I think you need to be discerning enough or have someone to help you be discerning enough to figure out this is really what an outsider would need to know about what I'm doing or what really is most interesting or important about it. I think it's pretty wise to start with something that's a little more unexpected. Like maybe you found something from their website or you saw something about their medical school in the news and it really connects to some research that you're doing or something where you can go beyond just that standard template of this is intended to tell you about my updates and reiterate my interest in the school.
There's a quote often misattributed to Mark Twain: "I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one instead." I would argue that a long update letter is disrespectful of the reader's time. And that's the last thing you want to convey in an update, especially since it's optional. So a short letter is mandatory if it's going to be read and well received. So no more than one page. There should be a chunk that's about why that school, and it should be original. It can call on the same reasons you wrote about in your secondaries, but you need to tailor these to your audience, to the school. The rest can be short, meaningful updates on your life. No large reflections on why it has continued this path toward medicine. You could have like one sentence to talk about the meaning of one of these updates, but keep it short, keep it simple, keep it professional and well written.
I mentioned a few of the things earlier, like publications, new patient care experiences, new leadership experiences, new initiatives you're spearheading, something that's pretty significant and is going to eat up a lot of your time before matriculation. But I think even just mentioning what you've been continuing to do since submitting is fine. I think if that's all you have, that puts a little more onus on you to connect that well to the school and make them care about it.
Most pre-meds think their lives are less significant than they are. So I think if you're thinking I don't have a significant update, really examine that statement. A significant update is anything that you've continued to do at a high level. It can be ongoing success at your work. It can be another set of good grades from school. It can be an ongoing achievement or an event at a student organization you're a part of. It can be a significant life accomplishment, running a half marathon, whatever. Those things qualify. And if you're smart, you can plan your life accordingly such that it will generate such updates. Would just suggest that anything that's going to make you a better physician or classmate is a good way to filter that through. So if you are continuing to build your Spanish fluency, for example, but you're not getting a grade for it, so it doesn't feel formal, that's worth updating them on. So that's an example of the kind of activity that is unofficial, but worth an update.
It would be an incredible amount of extra work to write a completely original update for every single school. Now, you may find yourself inspired to do that. I find that kind of unlikely given how draining the secondary essay writing process is. So I would say try to, make it school specific in the ways that you can. I really like the idea of starting with something really specific about the school. I mentioned earlier trying to find something about them in the news or something you read about them lately, something that is just an interesting way of showing how much they appeal to you. And then the middle can be all the normal updates that you're giving, and that can be reused from school to school. And then the final part that is sort of the final school specific appeal can be different. So I would say about like 60 to 75% of the letter can be the same from school to school, but then there's going to be that dressing you have to do in order for it to be truly impactful.
I think it's a good idea to have a part of each update letter be why our school, and why our school can't be generic for it to work. I don't think a school's mission is worth mentioning because mission statements are these deeply political compromises between different factions at the school. And what you get is at best hard to parse. So I wouldn't say that's the way to go, but you can discern what a school wants from what it says about itself, say in its choice of secondary essays. You can get a sense for who they're looking for and the kind of candidate they want. And you can be specific with it, why you want to go to each school in a way that is mostly unique to the school. So give that a shot. It's worth the effort. And that's also another reason to don't just write generic update letters because you'll come across as a generic candidate.
Yeah, just to build on that real quick, I would say that it's almost always better to do concrete connections versus abstract or value based connections. Because anybody can be like, oh, this thing I'm doing aligns with your values of social justice or your values of helping underserved patients. But if you can be like, this thing I'm specifically doing aligns with your XYZ mobile clinic where you help these kind of patient populations, that's going to be a lot more impressive because they can legitimately see a continuum of what you're doing and what you do while you're there. And I think if you're ever wondering, is the thing I'm bringing up too specific? The answer is no. You can never be too specific when you're selling yourself to a school.
Let's broaden that question. How should reapplications be different from regular applicants? I think the hope is that you'd learn from the mistakes of the past. So probably you didn't do the update letter process correctly the first time around. So try to get it right this time. That's true of any written communication. If you have written essays for a school in the past and you resubmit the same exact essays that did not get you the result you sought, well, that doesn't seem wise. It's the whole definition of insanity is doing the same thing twice and expecting different results. Also, it shows that you're not continuing to accomplish things in your life or build on your former experiences. So, as a reapplicant, you should change up much of your essays. Exactly how much depends on why you got rejected and what else is new in your application. See a good advisor for advice on that, but you don't have to wholesale change all your former essays, especially if you did a good job on them. But a new chunk in your personal statement, a new intro in your personal statement, I would say those would be the prerequisites. Better secondary essays, better essays overall is probably what you should change as a reapplicant. What would you add to that, Ryan, generally for reapplicants as it regards their written communication to medical schools?
Yeah, I mean, I would say find every opportunity to highlight the new things that you've done since last application. So it's not only just changing the intro of your personal statement or changing one of your most meaningfuls, it's changing them by focusing on exhibit A of how you're different from last time, which could be a new clinical job, a new research thing, whatever is the main way you've upgraded as a candidate. Just try to stay very busy during the interview season. Try to avoid scouring forums for this school is giving out interviews on SDN I'm seeing, or I'm on Reddit and these people are getting interviews. Idle hands are not a great thing. You want to try to stay as busy as possible just because it'll help pass the time with the stressful waiting game. And it'll have the residual benefit of actually giving you stuff to talk about in things like update letters, interviews, etc. If all you're doing is comparing yourself to others, you probably aren't improving. So just keep going, keep busy, keep doing what you're already passionate about.
Part of the process of applying to medical school is embracing the path of continuous improvement. And that's the running theme here, both about update letters generally, that's why they exist, but also in the fact that it takes many candidates multiple application cycles in order to get in. So just you are where you are, own it, love it, lean into it, get moving.